What's up, guys? So today we're taking a look at the all-Intel version of the Lenovo LOQ 15. For $699, you're getting an i5-12450HX along with an Arc A530M GPU. And before we jump into the specs of those two core components, about 9 months ago, I reviewed a different model of the LOQ 15, and it featured a Ryzen 7840HS along with an NVIDIA RTX 4050. And at the time of filming that video, that machine was going for right around $1,100, but it's currently on sale at Best Buy for just $750. So the two models now are just $50 apart. So it's the perfect opportunity to see if Intel is able to stack up to the competition on both the CPU and GPU side of things. But of course, we're going to take a look at the overall performance of this machine. We'll take a look at the screen quality, keyboard, and trackpad quality, overall port selection on this machine, camera, microphone setup, upgradability, battery life. All that's going to be covered in this video, but let's jump into it. So going back to the specs of this machine, you're looking at, of course, the i5-12450HX and the A530M. We're also looking at 12 gigabytes of DDR5, 4800 mega transfer per second memory, and there are two DIMM slots on the motherboard, so you can add in a second stick or swap out the existing stick with a max capacity of 32 gigabytes total at that max speed of 4800 mega transfers per second. We're also getting a 512 gigabyte Solidime NVMe PCIe Gen 4 SSD, so really fast storage, and there is a second SSD slot on the motherboard, so you can add in more storage down the line. In terms of the screen, we're looking at 1080p, 144 hertz, 15.6 inch in terms of screen real estate, and it's got a max brightness of 300 nits, and it also has 100% sRGB color coverage. So overall, a pretty good set of hardware for just $699. And if we take a little bit of a deeper dive into the CPU and GPU, the 12450HX is an 8-core, 12-thread CPU with 4 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores, with those performance cores boosting up to 4.4 gigahertz. So plenty fast for the A530M, perfect for this screen real estate, resolution, and refresh rate. And when we look at the A530M, you have 4 gigs of GDDR6 memory, so it might be a limitation in some games, but with medium to low settings at 1080p, we shouldn't really see any issues with the VRAM being a bottleneck. Now, when it comes to the battery on this machine, we're looking at a 60 watt-hour battery, and when we do take a look under the hood, there's definitely more room for a bigger battery, and I'm sure there are bigger batteries in some of the other models of the LOQ 15, especially where there's a little bit more in terms of hardware requirements, but with the i5 and with the A530M, you get stuck with the 60 watt-hour battery. And that leads itself to a limitation when it comes to battery life. So I tested this thing full gaming, no wall power, balanced mode, screen at around half brightness, and we got around 45 minutes of battery life. Now, Lenovo is saying that with, just regular YouTube, regular, browsing of the web, with the screen brightness at around 150 nits, so half brightness, you're looking at around 6 hours of battery life. I'm going to guess that's closer to maybe 2.5, 3 hours of battery life when you're actually testing this thing. But in games, you're looking at around an hour. Now, you do have a 170 watt wall charger, which is going to be able to power this thing up really quickly. It's like 80% in just 30 minutes. So overall, even though you will drain your battery really quickly, you can get it recharged in a breeze. Now, in order to get the maximum performance out of this Lenovo LOQ, you do have to keep it connected to wall power. So in order to enable the performance thermal mode within Lenovo's Vantage software, what is going to allow the CPU and GPU to get the most amount of wattage and run at the highest clock speeds, you have to keep it connected to the wall. So although this thing can be taken on the go and you can game for about an hour without the charger, in order to get the max performance out of this thing, it's got to be connected to the charger. And when it is connected to the charger, you do get really good performance out of both that i5 and the A530M, but in balance mode, you're definitely going to see a hit to the performance of this machine. So before we jump into the gaming benchmarks and testing this thing out in real games, let's first take a look at Cinebench R23, get a general idea of how the CPU performs, both in performance mode as well as in balance mode, and of course get a look at temperatures as well. How did the CPU and GPU pan out when it comes to temperatures? What are the clock speeds looking like when temperatures do get a little bit out of control? So when it comes to Cinebench R23 with the laptop connected to the wall running in performance mode, we got a score of 10,975, and that was powered mainly by the amount of wattage and the frequency that we're able to run the CPU at. So we're looking at around 75 watts on average being pulled by the i5, and we're looking at around 4.2 gigahertz on all the performance cores. Now, when we throw it into balanced mode, all of that drops. We're looking at closer to like 50-55 watts of power draw by the i5. We're looking at closer to 3.6 gigahertz on all the performance cores, which drops the Cinebench score quite a bit, almost 10% down to around 9,500 in Cinebench R23. So that's the big limitation to this machine. When you're not connected to wall power, when you're just running off of that 60 watt hour battery, you're gonna take a pretty big hit to performance. And it's not only a Cinebench R23 on the CPU, it's also in games with the GPU as well. But before we get to that, overall GPU performance when it comes to thermals. So in Cinebench R23, we didn't actually see the temperatures get super crazy on the CPU. We got to around 90 degrees Celsius, but testing with FurMark on both the GPU and CPU saw the CPU spike to around 95 degrees Celsius, up to 100 at one point. Thermal throttling for sure, dropping those clocks down quite a bit, down to around 3 gigahertz. At some point, it was down to like 1.9 gigahertz on the CPU just to try to keep the temperatures under control. It seems like Lenovo tries to keep the temps around 75 to 80 degrees Celsius on the CPU. And on the A530M side of things, testing with FurMark, we were looking at around 71 degrees Celsius peak in terms of temperatures on the GPU. Overall, really good cooling performance on the GPU side of things. Maybe not the best on the CPU side of things, but be it in balance mode, or even if you are running in performance mode and you do thermal throttle a bit, the clocks stay high enough where you shouldn't really notice a big hit to performance in games. You're also not going to be testing the CPU at 100% utilization in a gaming scenario. So overall, I'm okay with the thermal performance of this machine. Wish it was maybe a little bit better on the CPU side. Now, of course, the gaming experience on a laptop is not just about the performance of the CPU and the GPU. There's a lot of other things that go into it that make a great gaming laptop. Number one, the screen. Number two, the keyboard. Number three, the port selection to make sure you get all the peripherals that you want hooked up to your laptop. Let's start with number one, the display. So like I already mentioned, 15.6 inches, 1080p, and 144 hertz refresh rate. And with the 100% sRGB color coverage and the 300 nit peak brightness, this IPS display looks pretty good. Like, the color accuracy is nice. Looking at these different scenes, overall, it's a good looking display. And at 15.6 inches, you don't need more than 1080p resolution. Like, 1440p might be nice for some more clarity around text or maybe some better clarity around images. But overall, in a gaming scenario, with this level of hardware, 1080p at 144 hertz refresh rate is perfect. Now, the one glaring weak spot of this display is definitely the motion blur. And yeah, the response time on this thing is just not that good. Overall, with the UFO test, you can see there's a lot of trailing UFOs. The motion blur is pretty noticeable on this display, especially in some fast-paced games. So that's just something to keep an eye out for. Of course, at a $699 price point, you can't get everything. So the response time is lackluster, to say the least. But let's shift over to the keyboard and trackpad. Now, the trackpad is nice. Like, overall, decent size. You're not going to be using that often, to be honest. Since it's a gaming PC, you're most likely going to connect a mouse. But the keyboard, on the other hand, perfect. Like, this is the keyboard I expect now out of Lenovo machines. Plenty of travel. It feels really good. You also get the numpad as well. You even get the dedicated Copilot button on the keyboard, which is the new thing now with 2024 laptops that are Windows-based. So, yeah, overall, exactly what I would expect with a Lenovo keyboard on this machine. Even at this price point, still delivers exactly what I would want. Now, in terms of the port selection, overall, again, pretty good for a $699 budget. So on the back of the device, we get our Lenovo proprietary power connector to get that full 170 watts of power into our LOQ 15. We also then get two USB Type-A ports running at 5 gigabit per second. We also get an HDMI 2.1 port that can output 4K 60 and our RJ45 Ethernet connector in case you don't want to use the Wi-Fi 6 that's built into the LOQ 15. Over on the right side of the device, we get a USB Type-C 3.2 Gen 2 port capable of 10 gigabit per second. It's also capable of 140 watts of power delivery, so you're not getting the full 170 that the proprietary connector enables, but you can still charge this thing over Type-C. And it also is able to output DisplayPort 1.4. We then get a 3.5 millimeter headphone microphone combo jack and another USB Type-A running at 5 gigabit per second. So plenty of ports when it comes to this laptop. You can hook up a dedicated keyboard and mouse. You can add, DisplayPort 1.4 out of the Type-C, or power it with, a direct Type-C connection to a monitor. You can also use that HDMI 2.1, and you get onboard Ethernet. So overall, plenty of ports on this machine, not only for gamers, but also if somebody wanted to use this for more of a content creation or even like an engineering type device. If you're going to school for mechanical engineering, you need a CAD laptop. This again could be a perfect solution. So besides the disappointing response time of the display, everything else is shaping up to make the LOQ 15 a really, really compelling gaming laptop at a $699 budget price point. But there are some other things to be a little concerned about when it comes to this LOQ 15. And those lie in the speaker quality as well as the webcam quality. So when it comes to the speakers, we get two downward firing 2-watt speakers on the left and right side of the device. Overall, a decent stereo experience. They don't get very loud compared to this iPad Pro. Overall, the speakers could use a bit of a boost in terms of the sound quality. And when it comes to the webcam for this particular model, we're looking at a 720p webcam. Yeah, disappointing in this day of age to get a 720p webcam. Maybe you're not buying a gaming PC to do video conferencing or anything like that, but it would be nice to have a better webcam. Overall, the quality of the webcam microphone, again, a little lackluster, but maybe a little expected at this price point. Let's take a look and a listen. Here's a test of the built-in 720p webcam along with the microphone array. Overall, the 720p webcam could be a little bit better. Hoping for 1080, there is an option to upgrade to a 1080p webcam on a few of the different models of the new Lenovo LOQ 15, but this particular model comes with the 720p webcam, a little grainy, not the best, but it'll suffice for the majority of video conferencing needs. Microphones sound okay as well. Now, the last thing I want to cover about the LOQ 15 before we jump into the gaming benchmarks is the overall build quality and design of this laptop. So when it comes to the build quality, we are looking at an all-plastic construction. It's an ABS bottom and top shell. That does help reduce the weight a little bit. It's a 5.25 pound laptop. It does come in under an inch thick, so it's not the bulkiest laptop out there, which is nice as well. Should be easy enough to carry around in a backpack. But overall, the design aesthetic of this machine is nice. Like, you can definitely tell it's plastic construction. It's not going to feel like aluminum, but it does still look good. Like, the painted textured finish on the plastic does make this machine look like it could be metal, but Lenovo definitely did change the overall design aesthetic of this latest generation 2024 LOQ 15 compared to last year's model with that 4050 in it. So before, you had these blue accents on the back of the laptop around the fan grills. You also had intakes and outtakes for the fans on the side of the laptop, which have since disappeared. Overall, I think it's a little bit sleeker and a little bit less like gaming focused. Like, the blue accents, maybe a nice touch, but not the most, suitable for somebody that may be using it for school or for work. So I think it's been more subdued in terms of the overall design and aesthetic of this machine, which I actually like a little bit more. So overall, build quality, being a plastic construction, still pretty good. Definitely survives the bend test. So overall, okay with the design and build construction of the LOQ 15, but now it's time to get into what everybody's been waiting for, which is the gaming performance of this machine, both in and of itself and also compared to last generation with the RTX 4050. So we ran a 3-game benchmark suite, including F1 2022, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and then Cyberpunk 2077, running it at both medium settings in performance and balance thermal modes, as well as high settings at 1080p. Then we're also going to compare those scores to the 4050 and the 7840HS. So if we look at COD first, we're looking at 79 FPS on average, 1080p medium in performance mode, losing 20 FPS going to balanced thermal mode, and then at high 62 FPS.
If we compare that to the 4050, we're looking at 110 FPS down to 80, so a big jump down to the A530M. Similar story for the Cyberpunk 2077 benchmarks, looking at around 60 FPS at 1080p medium compared to 85 FPS with the 4050. So again, almost like a 40% drop in performance going to the A530M. And again, it's the same story with F1 2022, looking at 95 FPS on average at 1080p medium compared to 139 FPS with the 4050. So you are losing quite a bit of performance to the 4050 version of the LOQ 15, but that last gen deal isn't going to last long.
So there you go. Overall, this thing can definitely gain. At $699, it's kind of outperforming what I thought it might be able to output, but compared to the current deal with that 7840HS and the RTX 4050, yeah, it's a tough sell. For $750, if you can still find that laptop at this point when this video is published, definitely go and buy it. But I'm assuming those aren't going to last very long, being that they are last generation, but this current model with the all Intel hardware on the inside, it's honestly pretty compelling. You do get pretty good performance, both in 1080p high, 1080p medium in those titles we tested, along with those really high-paced shooters like a Valorant, where you're getting 200, 240 FPS, and you can use the variable refresh rate, you can use the peak 144 hertz refresh rate of the panel. Of course, there is a little bit of smearing, a little bit of motion blur due to that poor response time, but overall, it's exactly kind of what I was thinking this machine was going to provide at that $699 budget price point. So if you're in the market for a gaming laptop under around $750, I would definitely check this machine out. If you have any questions, leave those down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, get subscribed to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.